I find editing just purely music. Like I wish I was very well versed with music.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I feel like editing is so much of the whole filmmaking is like actually watching a film is like watching a symphony being put
Hmm.
together. Are you doing justice to the story?
Hmm.
If the edit is doing justice to the story, that means it's a good edit for me. Even if it's a bad edit, am I getting the experience what they want me to get on
Okay.
that? If I'm
Hmm.
questioning edit and all that in that experience, that means the film has a problem. The whole beauty of filmmaking is the whole process. Like
Hmm.
you are watching a film, you are sucked into everything in
Hmm.
terms of. So if the film works for you, then everything is an invisible art for you.
Hello, welcome to Where We Talk About Films, a podcast where, of course, where we talk about films. My name is Vidar Joshi, I'm your host, and आज का episode is about editing. How an editor crafts a narrative out of hours and hours of footage, fixing all the errors which happened at the production stage. And for your understanding, for your better understanding, and only for that, we decided to start this episode with a continuity error. So, yeah. So, while trying to learn about film editing, I came across this one line which said that cutting to a shot is like looking towards something. And this basically made me realize how much of a power a film editor holds over a film because they can basically decide what a person will see and what the person won't see. And this can either make the film or break the film. So, to understand this whole dynamic even more, today we have with us one of the finest film editors working in the industry right now. He's the man behind beautiful films like Masaan, Gully Boy, Raazi, Trapped, and so many more. So today we have with us Mr. Nitin Baid. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Vidar.
So, how are you, sir? How's this quarantine treating you?
I'm good, yeah. I'm like just been like it's like a sudden break on my
Hmm.
kind of work process that I was doing because I was jumping between like one film after another. So
Yeah, yeah.
when this whole thing happened, at that moment I was actually working on 83 and Gunjan Saxena.
Hmm.
So there was parallelly and there was an anthology of a short film which Dharma is doing that is for Netflix. So I was parallelly jumping between all these three projects, and that time suddenly, though every project was at a different stage, thankfully. So like
Hmm.
83, we were almost there in terms of the edit was locked, but we were just waiting for stuff to come from VFX, so we could just put it together and see
Hmm.
what final tweaks to make and all that kind of stuff. And but after that, it's been just quite like a relaxed. Like I've been
Hmm.
just chilling at home. I'm doing stuff which I wasn't getting time to do.
Hmm.
So like reading up a lot, watching stuff, learning keyboard, doing varied stuff, and like
Yes.
I've started got back into editing, but obviously nothing like massively because there's no time pressure right now. So everyone
Uh-huh.
is slightly relaxed, just waiting how things shape up in terms of the
Hmm.
coming days.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
what.
So let's start at the beginning. How your journey with films began?
So my journey with films began, I think it has to be like around nine when I was in class ninth or tenth.
Hmm.
It that is something like I feel like initially it sort of started with Bollywood. There's nothing else which I
Hmm.
was exposed to. So I was obviously interested into storytelling. I know like somewhere like before because I come from a very different sort of I come from a very business oriented background. So like my family is into business, so there was nothing like I didn't have never had an inclination towards going in that field itself. I always had that inclination where I was enjoying reading stuff, fictional books and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff, and watching stuff. But like it was still in class ninth and tenth, I think, watching like a lot of Bollywood films at that period of time. It was the 90s. Now, what you might look as some of the trashy movies and everything, but at that point of time, that sort of influenced you in some way. And I thought I wanted to get into films and I wanted to get into something related to media. Of
Hmm.
course, I didn't know what like a filmmaker job is at that point of time fully. Then like the major hitting happened was like when I did when I went to do my graduation course in Christ College, Bangalore.
Okay.
that time, like I was doing a course in BA in Communicative English, which was like 3 years of media studies, psychology, English literature. And at that point of time, I joined a film club in Bangalore called Collective Chaos.
Okay.
And that film club was pretty much the defining sort of setup for
Hmm.
my journey as a as like wanting to understand ki what I really want to do, or what filmmaking is, because that was the first time I was exposed to films from all around the world.
Hmm.
And it was the first time you got to see like Iranian movies, and you suddenly see like there's another way of making a film. It's just not a certain way how we have been grown up seeing a certain Bollywood way of filmmaking. So that itself like gave me like some sort of okay, there's a lot more you can do with films. And that was a clear idea. Okay, I want to do something with film.
Hmm.
And then after that, it was like there was a clarity ki I want to do something. I didn't know. Obviously the first instinct was initially was direction, in terms of like okay, let me
Okay.
just like I'll direct something.
Hmm.
So we directed like a couple of short
Hmm.
films while I was doing it. Was what happened was during the last year of my graduation, I was getting some gigs where I could like sit on the edit, and I could just
Hmm.
I could like work on the edit, and I could get like makes like a pocket money out of like
Hmm.
those just sort of supervising edits, which I sort of learned on the job. There was nothing, no
Okay.
one else sort of mentoring. So when that sort of happened, that was my first exposure to editing. These were films which were like corporate driven films, which were primarily designed to like there'll be a gladiators
Hmm.
meet. So we'll take footage from Gladiator and make like a narrative out of it.
Okay.
There's a gladiators meet. So like it's like stuff like this which was very strange, but like this gave me much more
Hmm.
exposure to just take out footage from random films and put
Okay.
together a narrative
And that
in terms
appealed
of
to
so
you.
that
That particular
it
thing
more
about
than
it.
appealing. That at that point of time it was more like a pocket money you were getting
Ah.
for something. You were like you were not thinking in terms of
Ha
that
ha
one
ha.
ki, is it really in the
Ha ha.
hindsight when you see it ki, of course there was some interest which sort of lead
Hmm.
on
Hmm.
to larger things in terms of that. But at the initial level you were like ki, ha matlab it's a very easy job, matlab
Ha
I
ha.
can do this and make some
Ha ha.
money also, and that's good only.
Hmm.
So suddenly it felt very easy to do that. And but of course you sort of within like 5-10 videos you sort of realize ki, okay, this is getting a little
Ha.
boring job
Ha
also
ha.
after a point of time, because you just have to go and look out the footage for whatever your emotion. You have written a
Hmm.
script,
Hmm.
you have to find exact footage from different
Ha.
films and put it together.
Hmm.
It
Hmm. Hmm.
almost like a building like a show reel with like footage of
Ha.
already short films.
Ha ha.
So that sort of like that was my introduction to editing itself, like
Okay.
and that sort of pretty much set my mind to what editing really revolves around.
Okay.
After that it was like I applied at SRFTI, applied at FTI. I didn't get in at FTI. I had gotten at SRFTI as a waiting list.
Hmm.
But then my dad was like slightly getting impatient. He wanted to sort of quickly decide, because he was, but of course being from business family, he was like "Ki,
Ha.
I don't know, this sort of line doesn't work for me
Hmm.
mentally, but like if you want to do it quickly and figure it out, because don't waste time." So then I ended up going to Whistling Woods,
Okay.
and that's where so the initial instinct, both the FTIs or FTI had applied for direction, and
Hmm.
Whistling Woods I had just applied for editing. For some strange reason, I just applied editing because I thought ki direction I'm gonna go get out and I'm gonna be an AD, and
Okay.
editing is something I can see where I'll have some control,
Hmm.
where I'll be involved in creative process.
Hmm.
And if I want to direct, that could eventually happen even while I'm editing or something like that. So there's no
Okay.
like sort of a fixed path anyways in this
Hmm.
line, because I was reading up a lot about other filmmakers about things. So editing seemed like one place where it all accumulates and you sort of finally see a film coming together.
Okay.
So that sort of got me the clarity, and did like 2 year course from Whistling Woods. And after that, it's been like my first film as an assistant was Gangs of Wasipur,
Wasapur.
and then I did like an associate on Hasi to Fasi,
Uh-huh.
and then I became independent with
Okay.
Masaan and
Hmm.
Trapped, and then it pretty much went on from there.
Okay. So I'll start when you started as an editor. You might be
Yeah,
getting tons and tons of footage, and that can be
yeah,
overwhelming sometimes. So how do you
yeah.
begin as an editor, artistically and
Hmm.
technically? Like, how do you start with so much of footage?
I see what the thing I've realized is ki initially I used to get scared with the amount of footage. Like I
Hmm.
felt like ki initially when I started editing, it always used to feel like ki, oh, actually this film has less footage, so you mentally sort of were relieved a little bit when you saw like a lot of directors shooting so much and
Uh-huh.
like shooting so much coverage in terms of like
Hmm.
from every possible
Hmm.
angle. So initially it was that fear, but I think Hasi the Fussy sort of trained me because we had like an insane amount of footage in that film. It was
Okay.
like a, it was like a, because Vinil was coming from an ad film background, he used
Hmm.
to shoot a lot
Hmm.
and he shot a lot, and there was a lot to go through every time you're doing it. So that sort of at least paved the way for me to, okay, okay, it can be handled. So when the footage comes to me primarily, I don't see it as ki, okay, there's a lot of footage. It's primarily I look at it ki, okay, like let me break it down.
Okay.
Let me just see this chunk
Huh.
first. Let me approach like this, like if you are going walking from this place to A to B, so I'll just figure what are the 3 points that you're going to be stopping at from A to B,
Okay.
and I'll break it down into that each point.
Hmm.
I'll break it down into 1 step, 2 step, 3 step,
Hmm.
4 step, and just sort of move in that way, because I
Hmm.
realized ki there's no other way to sort of go about it, because you have to sort of look at the footage. You have to see why the director has taken so many takes. What was he or she trying to achieve something in through different takes, or is it like he just to get like act, actors into a rhythm where
Hmm.
they can do something more amazing.
Hmm.
So that's kind of a thing. But I feel like instinctively it's more to do with like you create a structure when the first edit, then you see the amount of footage.
Hmm.
You first thing is just create a base.
Of the
So
entire
once you
film?
have a base, no, no, of the, like I'm talking about, like I'm right now I'm looking at scenes. I'm not
Okay.
even getting into the whole film.
No. Huh. Huh.
So
Huh.
I have like, let's imagine Gully Boy. I have the opening sequence
Hmm.
scene. Okay, so I have so many angles taken from that. So I just cut the scene. I like first like quickly just cut the scene from last takes. I
Huh.
pick up the last takes and I do a lineup. So I
Okay.
get the sense of structure. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
okay, this is what like the structure is.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just with last takes, I just sort of get a sense of structure.
Okay.
Then after that, what I do is then I start going into the detail. What is the emotion of the scene? What is the core thought of the scene?
Hmm. Hmm.
What is the scene trying to say? Why am I even cutting this scene?
Hmm.
So those kind of question I start building up in terms of what does which character wants which angle, or what sort of like how do we introduce Ranveer? Do we introduce
Okay.
him in a manner where
Huh.
he's coming as nonchalantly,
Hmm.
or we introduce him in a slightly heroic manner?
Hmm. Hmm.
What is good? Like why has the director so you start understanding why
Hmm.
director has approached something and why a certain thing has been shot in a matter. So you start discovering, and then through the process, you if you have your own discoveries,
Hmm.
you know this is not working what the director intended.
Hmm.
You cut to something what you feel is much more organic and much more real to the honest to the material. So
Okay.
once you have like cut one scene, then you that process goes on for individual scenes, like
Scenes.
till all the scenes are ready.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then when all the scenes are put together, that's when your editing of the film starts.
Huh. Okay.
That's when you start like joining it
Hmm.
together, making it like a smooth ride from one scene to another scene,
Hmm.
making it seamless. It
Hmm.
doesn't feel like they are shot like a chunks.
Hmm.
When you're watching it, it feels seamless. So
Hmm.
that's the process. And of course, going back to the footage, looking at the amount of footage, that always keeps happening. Even when you
Huh.
accumulate
Huh.
the whole film, suddenly you will realize ki, oh, I was cutting the scene, because you are mostly cutting the scenes as short films
Huh.
every time,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because you want to put everything that is there best in the scene. You
Hmm.
want to put it, even though you have a knowledge somewhere, like once you edit 2 3 films, you will subconsciously have that certain knowledge ki, ye to, this will go, I'm
Hmm.
sure this will get out of the film,
Hmm.
this will stay, this won't be there.
Hmm.
But like you still want to keep it just to see the larger picture
Huh.
once ek bar, as per the written
Hmm.
word, and then you want to just remove when you are cutting in a seamless flow.
Okay.
So that's where the whole difference is, to sort of like let the film breathe itself and sort of
Huh.
find the rhythm yourself.
Hmm.
And that's when you, whether when you put it together, you need to go back again to the footage. You
Hmm.
will go back to the footage, but there's a different journey now because you have seen the footage, so you are much more aware now.
Huh. Huh.
While you were cutting the scene, you have sort of mentally aligned yourself with the footage, so it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like there's a lot of footage now in terms of
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. Okay, so after cutting each and individual scene as a short film, you said you put the whole film together,
Yeah,
and at this stage
yeah.
you decide the pace of the film because you were editing each and every scene individually. So now the overall pace of the film is decided during this part or even later.
No, no, no. Overall, the pace of the film will be decided once I put everything together.
Hmm.
And it's not something like ki I sit and decide ki, okay, I'm gonna make it. Like there's
Haha.
an inherent rhythm while you are cutting the film itself. When
Hmm.
you start cutting the film, you have an inherent rhythm. When you read the script, you have an inherent rhythm. Now the thing is, you are trying to catch that rhythm.
Hmm.
It's more to do with like not that you are gonna cut it, like there's
Haha.
already a rhythm that is there in how the actors have delivered the lines, how your characters have written, how your script is written. Now it's all about just actually finding ways to find that actual rhythm which would fit in for the film.
Hmm.
And that's when you sort of like start doing it. So with Gully Boy, it was like when you sort of like, just to give you that example, we sort of put it together. It was a really long cut because we had so much
So
stuff
much.
to play around with.
Hmm.
And then when you start like going, and it's all very very specific to, then you start like analyzing ki, why is this scene important,
Hmm.
why is this scene not important, what are we trying to say in this scene, can it be said without saying the line, or can does that line is important, what the
Hmm.
dialogue the character is speaking. Like just to give you very like a very interesting example was Gully Boy. The first time Murad writes poetry on the terrace,
Huh.
if you have seen that scene,
Yes, yes.
that scene was actually written for something else. So if you
Okay.
go in the deleted scenes,
Hmm.
there's like an opening sequence which was shot, which
Hmm.
was like a beautiful opening sequence through Dharavi. It was shot of his friend dying, which we
Okay.
completely removed from the
Uh-huh.
film. So if you check the deleted scenes, there's a whole opening sequence of his friend. He goes to the loo. Morning he wakes up. He goes to the loo. He enters the loo. He sees his friend dead or whatever in the loo. He drank poison and sort of died in the loo. And then there's a funeral that happens.
Okay.
And at that night, he's writing poetry for that friend. So
Okay.
what happened was
Change.
when
Yeah.
so this was how it was written and this was how it was shot. So when I sort of saw it, I'm like, why, like my investment in the film is much more with the mother than the this friend,
Hmm.
and or than with this one.
Hmm.
So if I could connect this writing poetry bit to the mother, it will have much more impact,
Right.
because then you
Okay.
will feel his pain much more
Hmm.
than just the friend ke liye
Hmm.
likhega to. So that's when I sort of shifted, like when we edited that whole chunk of the friend, we used that night bit just after the wedding thing.
Uh-huh.
So after he sees his mother alone sleeping this
Hmm.
one, and that night he's writing poetry, the
He
feeling
tells
is us
us.
altogether
Yeah,
something
yeah, yeah.
different. You have got the sympathy with the character.
Hmm.
You have seen like there's an artist inside him who's writing from his own experiences and writing from his own whatever he's seeing in his life. And there's already, as an artist to artist, there's always a connection that the audience gets with like the person
Yeah.
कि yeah, matlab, this guy is so matlab, there's some sort of a
Uh-huh.
generosity or some sympathy that you can create
Hmm.
to your characters, and that sort of builds up to this one. So this is like one example. There are like
Hmm.
tons of examples like this, where you sort of have these journeys which constantly keep happening, where
Hmm.
you tweak certain things and suddenly the
Impact
emotion changes,
increases.
the thought changes, the uh, final throwback of
Uh-huh.
the scene changes.
Okay. So, one basic question a lot of editors have been asked ki, how do you know when to cut? Like, how does that work
How
for
do
an
you
editor? Know when to cut a
huh,
particular shot?
see, I feel it's a very instinctive thing.
Hmm.
Personally, it's like music. Something like you play a music, and people who are like creating music. I find editing just purely music. Like I
Okay.
wish I was very well versed with music.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I feel like editing is so much of the whole filmmaking is like actually watching a film is like watching a symphony being put
Hmm.
together. And like when I say that, of course it sounds very like beautiful and glorious. Of
Huh.
course there's a lot more struggle in terms of like a lot of people coming
Hmm.
together to create the symphony. But what I mean is ki there's that rhythm of the film in terms of like ki what, like you have like these chords which are taking up somewhere it's going down, somewhere it becomes
Hmm.
emotional, somewhere it becomes like dark, somewhere so when I sort of approach it, I matlab, thankfully I'm like not never thinking ki, where to cut it. Like I've gone in
Huh.
instincts. Like I'm not a person like, and there are a lot of editors. Everyone has a different process that's
Hmm.
there. But there are a lot of editors like who will say कि इसमें 2 frame कम कर दो,
Huh.
इसमें 4 frame कम कर
Huh.
दो.
Huh.
They're very sharp. Like
Huh.
a
Huh.
lot of editor primarily who come from film editing background, which was like
Real.
cutting on
Yeah,
steam.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
so they were very sure about 8 frame, and I am a digital guy in terms of like born in like FCP and like
Huh.
started my career with FCP. So I've never had like that kind of an instinct कि 4 frame कम कर दो
Hmm.
उसमें से and that will be a good
Hmm.
scene. That it's 5 frame कम कर
Hmm.
दो
Hmm.
उसमें से and everything. So that kind of a thing. I purely go with my instinct in terms of things, and it's more of a discovery for me also.
Okay.
It's like कि I'm not saying कि I know everything.
Yeah.
I don't know anything. I am also as clueless as my journey, like as in terms of like
Hmm.
to explore the film as to find its own rhythm,
Hmm. Hmm.
because it's like a journey for me also, and it's trying to understand ki what the film is trying to say.
Hmm.
So sometimes I will see to it. I'll hold something longer and I'll just see to it. Oh, is it working? It's looking nice. Suddenly I'm holding on to that moment,
Huh. Huh.
and the stay is making a lot more sense.
Hmm.
Which is why, like when you see like any sort of a film, whether it Trapped or Masan, like
Hmm.
you never had like that kind of a thing. Like we would like just see if the performance holds,
Huh. Huh.
if there's something that you want to say through a performance and something that you want to
Hmm.
say through a look, like the Masanka scene where he's looking into the river.
Hmm.
It's just like a simple sort of a moment when he throws the ring and he's looking at the river. It's like how much you want to hold on to, and how
Huh.
much before he starts
Hmm. Hmm.
running
Hmm. Hmm.
and going diving into the water.
Hmm.
So those are the things, it comes instinctively. Once you start practicing more and more, it gets refined in terms of a general thought process.
Okay.
When I say there's a way that the world perceives a film,
Hmm.
because we are conditioned to
Hmm.
see a
Hmm.
film in a certain way. We Hollywood has conditioned us. The Western storytelling has massively conditioned us
Hmm.
in terms of like how we see stories as. We now like there's no way like today, like it's becoming much more difficult for films to be much more experimental, because there's so much Hollywood conditioning that has happened in our brains.
Huh.
As soon as story deviates a little bit, you is like, why is it wasting
Hmm.
our time, yaar?
Hmm.
कहानी
Hmm.
बताओ ना.
Hmm.
So there's no matter of like you're not investing in that experience. Very little is being invested in
Hmm.
terms of the experience. So that is always there. So that is the conditioning. So I'm saying in that format, I sort of have found the rhythm ki I go with my instinct. It's nothing like ki uh, there's no fixed sort of a way
Hmm.
ki with each film it's a different instinct, and with some films I keep on making mistakes. Hopefully, I make mistakes and find my own
Yeah, yeah,
solution.
yeah.
It's not like a easier sort of a route
Huh. Huh.
to figure that out.
Okay. So you mentioned Masan. So let's talk about
Yeah,
one of my favorite scenes from Masan, which is when
yeah,
Richa Chadda's character and Sanjay Mishra's character come back home after their first visit to the police station, where
yeah,
Richa
yeah,
Chadda serves food to Sanjay Mishra. And I feel
yeah.
dramatically that was one of the most impactful scene because it was so
Hmm,
realistic and holding on to the shots where Sanjay Mishra is breaking down off screen and we see Richa
hmm,
Chadda's
hmm,
character. So I just want to know
hmm.
your process of editing that scene and how it started
Uh,
and how different was the first cut as compared to the final
hmm.
product we have seen.